Καλησπέρα σας και καλώς ήρθατε στον ΙΑΝΟ. Στο πλαίσιο των εκδηλώσεων του θεσμού Αθήνα Παγκόσμια Πρωτεύουσα Βιβλίου 2018, η Πρεσβεία του Ισραήλ παρουσιάζει τη συζήτηση με θέμα Life-Changing Moments in Literature, στιγμές ορόσημα στη λογοτεχνία, μεταξύ των τριών Ισραηλινών συγγραφέων Εσκόλ Νεβό, Έστι Χαγίμ, Ήρης Ελίγια Κοέν και του συγγραφέα Χρήστου Χομενίδη. Βιβλία θα βρείτε μπροστά στην είσοδο του καφέ. Ο λόγος τώρα στον κύριο Χομενίδη.
I'll talk in English, speak in English because this is the rule. Thank you very much that you came here, that we are here. It's a very difficult afternoon, not only because the traffic jam in Athens is awful, but because we are all, the three Israeli writers and me, were all very sad because what happened yesterday, and of course, I, as a Greek citizen, as somebody who doesn't live and who doesn't know the real reality in Middle East, I cannot justice, I don't know to who is the real guilty of this incidents, awful incidents. I don't know, it would be extremely superficial by me to blame the one or the other. What I know is that it is a tragedy during demonstration or some demonstrations, young children and even babies to get killed. And when I first read the news, the phrase that came in my mind was this by John Donne that Ernest Hemingway used as a title of one of his most famous novels, that the bell tolls for us. Whenever something like this happens anywhere in Earth. I discussed it briefly with my fellow writers and understood that they want, as Israelis, yes, of course, as Israelis, to make short statements about this before we start talking about literature and our lives and our art. Yes, of course. So.
Sorry, I just don't hear in this ear.
אולי אנחנו נתחיל.
לא, זה מצוין, ככה זה הכי טוב.
I would ask you, my friends, before we start talking, to repeat your names in order as to the audience start recognize you. Ladies.
Just our names. My name is Esti G. Chaim. G is Goldstein, my father's name, which I keep. I'm an Israeli writer. I wrote 5 novels, 2 plays. My 6th novel is on the way. My last novel won the Brenner Prize and other prizes, and it was published in several countries. In Italy, last November, there it's nominated to a literary prize finalist.
Hi, good evening. My name is Iris Elia Cohen, Iris. You can, it could be Iris, though it's Iris in Hebrew. I have 6 books so far, 4 novel books, and 2 poem collections. So I'm both a poet and a writer or author. My last book was just came out a week ago, so you can congratulate me.
When a book is get published in Greece, what we say is kalotaxido, which means to have a nice trip, a good trip.
Okay, great.
Yes. Good blessing.
Oh yes, definitely.
Just as if the books were ships, boats.
Yeah.
So kalotaxido.
Very nice.
No storms on the
No
way.
storms, yes.
Yeah. those storms,
Good storms.
those storms as Dorit Rabinyan had, it's a good storm because, you know, it's
Good
revived.
breeze.
Yes.
Well, I'm Shkol Nevo. Before talking about my biography, I wanted to say something about
course.
what you said to address. I also think it's a terribly sad day, and there's a dangerous process of when there's a constant conflict, a constant violent conflict, there's a dangerous process of dehumanization. When you stop seeing the other as a human being, and I think
To become cynical.
you become cynical, you become too much used to these tragedies. And I think one of the things we as writers can do is the opposite, rehumanization, to create this sensitivity. So I hope our discussion today will be able to do that. About myself, well, I have this book in Greek, which I'm very proud of.
When was it published?
It was published a year ago. And Gregory, you will have to remind me the name in Greek. How is it called in Greek? Tres orofe, 3 floors.
Nice accent.
Yeah, working on it. And this book is translated to 11 languages, but it's very special to have it here in Greece.
And I can assure you that it's very well translated.
Okay. I'm happy to hear.
Thanks to Castaniotis. Thanks to Luisa. Hello, Luisa. So, when we started, when Ion called me on the telephone and asked me to coordinate this meeting, he wanted to put a title. And we chose a title together. I don't remember the exact title. The idea is, it's a question, which are the incidents of our lives that turned us into writers? How did, what happened to 2 innocent girls and the innocent boy that didn't allow them to become account managers or architects or I don't know what, lawyers, but they were trapped in this art, the art of writing. And I want you to give me the incidents, the facts, in an autobiographical way.
Well, it's my turn.
We want us to talk to us. We want you to talk to us about yourselves.
Okay, that's very easy, I believe, to everybody, but or not, or the opposite, both. I didn't know I was going to be a writer. I never even dreamed about it because although I write since I'm 5 years old, since I studied in a religious school, very religious school, because my mother was very religious and my father was a communist. So until the 3rd grade, I was studying in the kindergarten and 1st and 2nd grade in the synagogue. In Haifa, and I grew up in Haifa. And in the 3rd grade, my father took me out, and I started studying in a non-religious school. It was traumatic for me because we were 10 girls, and afterwards we were 40 kids with boys on the corridor running, and it was very scary. I think this was one of the life-changing events that maybe made me write. Maybe.
Were you introvert as a young girl?
I never was really religious, although I started.
Were you introvert? Were you?
Yeah, very,
yes.
very, yes. Very. I hardly spoke. I was very shy. And I grew up in a Holocaust survivor's parents. My mother was a baby. She was 1.5 years old when the war started. My father was 11. And my father was very lively. My mother was very crazy. And I couldn't speak about anything outside.
Where were your parents born?
In Hungary, in Budapest.
Both of them?
Both of them, but they never knew each other in Hungary. They met in Israel. So I wrote to save my life, actually, since I was very small. I was also a reader. My father liked art, and he taught me all about arts. He paints and plays music, although he was a hard worker. And
What was his profession, his job?
he was working with iron. He worked in a factory. And but he was a self-made man. He read a lot, and he painted, and he played music just from hearing. And so I was breathing art since I was a kid, and reading and reading and reading. I studied dance, classical ballet, and we didn't have money for that, so my grandmother paid for it. And you must understand that in Israel, in that time in Haifa, everybody went to a youth movement. Only me, I went secretly. I went to study ballet, and I thought I'll be a dancer. And then I studied theater, but I was writing all the time. I think writing was like one of my organs.
You
So
were
it was very
writing your
natural.
diary or short stories or
No, short
Or
stories, poems,
poems.
diary, whatever.
whatever?
And my poems were published in youth
Magazines or
yeah,
papers.
but I never thought about it because I thought that it was, very natural. Writing is like eating, is something natural
But there was not another writer in your environment,
no,
close environment.
not at all. And just I'm finishing, but it's a long story, of course. And then when I studied theater, I went to study theater because I was very shy. I wanted to get over it. My teacher, she was one of the best directors in Israel. She directed Hanoch Levin in his first play. She asked me when I brought a monologue that I wrote, who wrote it? And I said, me. And I was very afraid she'll say, it's awful. Why did you bring your monologue? Bring one of the best monologues. And she said, you should be a writer. And then I understood it maybe it was something. This is the whole story, shortly.
Okay, I'll ask you, we'll return to your story.
Okay.
Let's ask the second lady of our company.
Yes.
Where were your parents from? Or your
My
grandparents?
parents came from India, from South India. There was a small Jewish community, and it's gone now. It came to Israel on 53, and since then there's like few Jews left in Cochin, in Kerala. It's southern India.
Can I ask you all one question, because it's the first time that I'm thinking about this. Your parents were from Hungary. Your parents were from India. Your parents were from
Grandparents from Poland.
Poland.
But he's the grandson of the Israeli president, right?
Prime Minister.
Prime Minister.
Prime Minister.
I didn't know that.
Which
No.
the prize the literary prize we
Okay.
His name
In your places, in your families, were you still speaking the languages of your old countries?
Actually, it's a big question, but maybe when I'll start talking about my books, because
Yes.
I have a story about how I did. Well, it starts with a small girl lived in the Upper Galilee, dark with the two ponytails, that ran into the library every day. I was like 7 years old, and I was running, and each day I got a book, and I went home, and I was bumped into the trees on the way, and electrical poles, and I just read all the time in the streets, in the house, in night, evening, every time. And one day the librarian told me, "No, Iris, do you see the top shelf over there? I think you can read the books of the great author, Israeli author, children Israeli author, and you can read it." And I was amazed. I said, "Okay, I can read his books," and I was fascinated by his book, and I was reading every day again, back and forth to the library. And then one day I told Rachel, that was the librarian name, and said, "Rachel, I want to write the great author a letter that I want to be like him. I want to be an author like him." And I sat down and wrote, "Dear," I won't tell his name now, but I want, when I grew up, I want to be an author like you. Sincerely yours, Iris, Elia. And I sent the letter, and I was waiting for his reply for 1 month, and 2 months, and 3 months, and there was no answer. And then 6 months, and 7 months, and it was no. I mean, probably the mail system was better these days. But anyway, after 9 months, I've got a reply.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Pregnancy.
Yes, it was very, it was quite a letter, and it was written there, he wrote me something like that. Dear Iris, I've read your letter. I've understood that you've read all my books, and I appreciate it. Though I found some spelling mistakes in your letter. And then I'm afraid you can't be a writer. That it was a devastating, it was a terrible, terrible
What's
letter.
the name of the guy?
And I can't tell it now, just because I want to
It's
say
a secret?
first.
What?
No. I want to say two things about it. He passed away, and I can't say his name, but I want to say that he was my first teacher of writing, because
So
he
you
wrote
met?
No, I didn't meet him, but he wrote me 2 things. First, he told me, if you want to be a writer, just keep reading. You're not reading enough. You're not reading enough. So this was his. And then he said, and authors need to know how to wait. Just wait. And like maybe 30 years later on, I became a writer, and it took me a lot of time to get over it, but I did. And then I always said that if he didn't, tell me, maybe I was. I published my first book when I was 38.
Do you remember, Iris, how was the sense? How did you feel when you touched your first book for the first time?
Yes. Actually, when my first book, This is Maktub, came out, he passed away like few years earlier, and I'm not angry with him. I really appreciate his advices, because he told me really good advice to wait. Authors need to wait.
To be patient.
Yes, and I always said to my student now that you have, in order to be a writer, you have to know how to read. Okay, you have to read first a lot of even good things, bad things, everything. You need to read to know what you wanted to write as. And so this is my story of how it began.
Okay, I have many questions, numerous questions, but let's ask my.
I was now 3 days in Hydra, the Greek island, and I had a lot of time to think about the question of life-changing moments. 3 days looking at the beautiful scenery of Hydra, and I understood something in retrospective, that there's a connection between all the life-changing moments I had in my life regarding writing and regarding my personal life. They all seemed like a mistake. So, and then
Mistake
I thought,
or accident?
They seemed, at the time, they seemed like doing the wrong thing. Now, there's a scene in my book which occurred to me when I was thinking about it. There's one in the second floor in Tre Orfi. There's Hani, and she's alone at home. Her husband is away for business, and there's a knock on the door. And on the other side of the door, there's a fugitive, a criminal. And this criminal is asking for refuge. Can I please stay at your home for 24 hours? Now, this criminal is also the brother of her husband. They're not speaking to each other. And what makes it even more complicated, that he always had something to her. Now, she has all the reasons to say, no, you can't stay here for 24 hours. My children are at home. You are a criminal. But she says, yes. And then there's a paragraph where she explains, I felt like there's this strong voice inside of me calling, do the wrong thing. Do the wrong thing. Now, if you ask about writing, I was 28, I think. I finished my psychology studies, my BA. I worked tremendously hard to reach the grades that will enable me to get accepted to the MA in psychology. All my life I was told I would be a psychologist.
Wow.
I strived to get accepted. It was really not easy. I got accepted to the MA in Bar Ilan. It was a big celebration. But then, meanwhile, I started writing in a creative writing workshop, short stories. And then there was a point I had to decide, am I finishing my first book or am I going to the MA studies in Bar Ilan? Now, this was the right thing to do, was to go to the Bar Ilan University. But I felt like this strong voice calling, do the wrong thing. So I called Bar Ilan. I remember the night. I called the secretary, and I told her I'm not coming. And she said, "Are you sure?" I said, "Yeah, I'm quite sure." And then I never came back to this road not taken of my life, and I finished my first book, and I did this
Can I ask you a
mistake.
question? I
Yes.
didn't know when, till now, till 5 minutes ago, that you are the grandchild of the Prime Minister who?
Levi
Levi
Eshkol,
Eshkol.
third prime minister.
And
Okay.
literary prize, there is a literary prize that Levi Eshkol established.
Okay.
And I got
You
it
won.
twice, yeah.
You
And
got it.
Yeah,
it's,
me too.
yeah, luckily his grandfather
So,
established a literary
do you
prize.
remember your grandfather?
No, he died before I was born.
Were you faced, tell us, you're abroad now, you're not between, among Israelis, so you can feel
completely
more free.
open, yeah.
Were you, from when you were a little child, were you faced by your family or by your environment as the grandchild of the grandson of a prime minister who has to be in politics, to get in politics?
No. Look, I'm after his name. My name is Eshkol. He was Levi Eshkol. And there are not a lot of Eshkols in my country. So I couldn't hide it. It was quite clear. But I would say, luckily, I was born in a time when it was a non-issue. I think when you talk to my mother, being the daughter of a prime minister, she had a burden. She would.
So you have the surname of your mother?
Yeah, she switched the surname to my private name. So I didn't grow up with a burden. I would say I grew up with a strong sense of connection to my country, to a strong sense of this is mine. I care about it. I could never go live in another place. And I got it through my mother because I didn't know him. And she is a very political person. If something happens in the country, she feel it in her body.
She takes it personally.
She takes it very personally, and both of them, my father also, very political people. So I remember myself as a child demonstrating without exactly knowing what I'm demonstrating. So I grew up in a very political family, but not because of my grandfather. It was not a burden I had to deal with, and there was no expectation of me to be a politician. Maybe on the contrary. One politician in the family is enough. Yeah.
How many did you feel growing up that you were in the shadow of the older great Israeli writers like Amos Oz, like Yeshua, like what's the name of the other one?
David Grossman.
Grossman. Yes. Did you have this sense?
Albert Yeshua.
Were these people your idols? Let's say.
Are you asking?
Yes, I'm asking
Okay.
the three of you.
I think I didn't think about anybody when I started writing really novels, short stories. I thought about what I really felt that must be written, the things that I had to write. I never thought I read everybody. I was influenced by maybe Albert Yeshua, The Lover. When I was 17 or 16, I read it, and it was about a girl in Haifa like me that fell in love in an Arabic boy from Haifa, and I thought, oh, it's an opportunity that suddenly I recognize it can happen. And I read everything, not only Israeli books. I read Zorba. I read everything.
Oh, you read Zorba?
Of course, my father. This was the first book of a very important publishers, Amoved, the first book, and my father got it as from his work. They gave them books. It's called Amoved, the people working. This is something socialist that gives them culture. So this was the first book in my father's library from that publishers. I read it. I was influenced by everything. But when I came to write, I wrote something totally new. That's what I thought. Of course we are connected. As Iris said, and Ishkol, I read a lot, and when we read, we probably read like spices, like literary spices, because you read and you learn. And you read, and sometimes you're influenced, even if you don't realize you're influenced. But I come, as I told you, from Holocaust survival parents. They're very, very young during the war, so every generation has his second generation.
Tell me something, because questions come to me all the time. Could you say that the Bible, the Holy Bible, was one of your fountains, of your great shadows?
Yes, it is. In this book, my last book, it's called Corner People in English, and it's autobiographic. It's based on my autobiographic, but also, it's literature. It's truth and non-truth mixed together. The main character, called Dvori, she was reading about Esther from Megillat Esther, the Purim tale, which is written in the Bible. And she was making an MA, master's about it. And when she was a child, at the Purim, this holiday, you're dressed up. You're putting masks, and she was dressed up as Esther, the Queen Esther, for 7 years, like me. The same custom every year. And Esther, this Esther in the Bible, she saves her nation through some feminine manipulation. And an aunt that comes into this very post-traumatic family that lives in Haifa. She comes from Hungary at 1968 in the middle of the night with nothing. She's called Esther. She's called Esther Nani. And she is very lively, and she's vivid, and she changed the house, and she shows the little girl that is invisible to everybody. She gives her a typing machine. And she tells her to write. She teaches her to write, but she also, and with all vivid life she brings, she has some darkness, because nobody knows what she did once during the war. Her name is Esther, and maybe, because she's very pretty and very full with charm, she did the same as Esther did. So without even feeling, the Bible is inside in a way. It's influenced by it, of course.
Iris,
I've got this funny story about your question, because that's what I was
let me ask you something more particular. Do all the Jewish children study obligatory the Bible?
Yeah.
So you know it
since the second grade.
You know it very well.
Yeah. But I want to ask to answer about your question about our influence from the great authors, David Grossman. So I was a great admirer of David Grossman. I mean, the day I've got I start writing the book, I've got a lot of, I don't know how to say it, kadvuyot? Correspondence with David Grossman books, and then I've got a lot of rejection. It was my first handwriting, and I got a lot of rejection. And finally, I got one positive answer, and it was from the Kibbutz of Meuchad, which is the publisher of Maktub, and the publisher of David Grossman is a published house. And I got into the house, and I said, "Oh my God, this is the house that David Grossman is going on." I went to the corridor, and I was talking to the, PR girl, and I said, "You know what? In the book fair, the next book fair, please put me next to David Grossman. And she said, no way, you're a young writer, you just came out. You're a young writer, I can't put you next to David Grossman, with all the respect. And I said, I'll do everything, go through Israel, wherever you want, just put me next to David Grossman. He said, okay, now she called me and said, okay, finally I've managed to convince Menachem Perry to agree that. And the day I came to the book fair, it was big in the Rabin Center, in the center of Tel Aviv. It's a huge book fair. And up there I see David Grossman, and I'm with my book, going to him, to the other plate, to the other side of the cabin, and I tell him, oh, David, you know, I'm an admirer. I said, okay, I'm happy. He didn't see the book, and he signed me in. It was Isha Borachet Mibsora. I don't know how to say it in Hebrew. In the end of the land. Yes, it was. And then he said, oh, just a minute. You're the one that wrote Maktub? Well, it's a really good book. I said, really? And I started crying. Really, do you think so? He said, oh yes, it's a great book. And then he came over and he left his books and he came over to me and he people, there's a new young author here. You should read this book. You know?
This is how he is, actually. This is how he is.
That was so amazing because he's such a generous person.
Generous
What
and
about
modest.
you? Who are your...
Actually, I'm going to use this opportunity. But one of my most influential Israeli writers is sitting with us today, and it's Yudit Katzir. And
Respect.
like, usually I mention your name when you're not here, but now I have this special privilege. When I think of writers who influenced my writing, strangely or not strangely, mainly were women. Judith first, Savion Liebrecht, after, short stories and then novels. So, of course, the generation you're talking about is in my blood. It's running in my blood. Amos was also my teacher.
Really?
Yeah, he was
Wow,
my
he was
teacher
teaching you
in Ben Gurion University. But when I think about books who changed my life, like Judith's first
for
book
me
is
too.
called Closing the Sea.
For me too.
It changed the way I think about literature. And till this day, I find myself writing paragraphs and think this is kind of Judith Katzir paragraph, which is a good sign. And you were talking about Zorba. Zorba the Greek. I also have a story about Zorba. Actually, I never told this story, but we're here in Greece.
I think that impresses me is that Kazantzakis as a name is brighter in Israel than Kavafi.
Then
I asked-
Kavafis? No, both of them. Both of them are known, yeah. But
I mean, we, and I will take Grigoris Bekos as somebody who knows even better, we believe, the Greeks, that our greatest literature personality during the 20th century is Kavafi.
Kavafis.
Gaddafi.
Gaddafi.
Yeah.
But
Everybody knows him.
but
I mean, we as Greeks don't put anybody next to Kavafi. Don't you think so?
Kavapis, it's Ithaca.
Ithaca.
Yeah.
Ithaca. Right.
But in this book that she was talking about, the Am Oved book, it's Zorba the Greek, I had a very interesting story with it. It was in the library of my parents, and there was a dedication to my grandfather. And the dedication went like this: to the Zorba inside Eshkol.
Beautiful. Wow.
Signed by Ein, which is a letter, like a letter, and I would, like an A. I asked my mother, who is this Ein? Who is this person who wrote him, who dedicated the book? And she said, I don't know, but I felt she was lying. And I started this kind of, first I had to read the book. I was 16 or 17, reading Zorba the Greek for the first time in my life.
For Kazantzakis.
Exactly the age. It was definitely a life-changing moment. If you grow up in an intellectual family,
Yeah.
all about ideas, and then you read Zorba the Greek,
Right.
it changes your life as a man. And then I had this investigation to find out who dedicated the book to my grandfather and what were the relationship between them. Now, actually, I found out, but I won't tell you.
You won't tell us.
It's in my next novel.
You won't tell us.
You'll have to read.
What? I didn't hear. What?
I'll tell you a funny story about.
Okay. Well,
I'll tell you.
She's quite famous in Israel.
but it's a woman.
Yeah.
It's a
I'll
woman.
tell you. I'll tell you.
Amazing. Amazing story.
I will tell you two funny stories about Zorba the Greek. The first is just a fact. There was a real person that was the one who was used by Kazantzakis as the model of Zorba the Greek.
Yeah.
His name was Yorgos Zorbas, and he was Macedonian. And if I was the Prime Minister of Macedonia or the former Republic of Macedonia, I would tell the Greek Prime Minister that Zorba is made by a Greek writer, but the source was a Macedonian person.
Wow. But you know right,
I don't
because
care.
it's everybody recognizes it with Greece, of
Yeah.
course. But you know
But anyway, the second funny story is that okay, I read Zorba the Greek when I was 16 years old, as you. And I remember my late mother telling me that you have to grow up in order to read Kazantzakis. I don't like Kazantzakis particularly. I prefer many other Greek writers and, of course, international writers. But I read it, I was enthusiastic, I was just 16. When I first saw the movie, The Fiddler on the Roof,
the Fiddler on the Roof.
The Fiddler on the Roof, I understood that the Fiddler on the Roof was
Zorba.
the Jewish Zorba.
It's Zorba, exactly. But you know, it was written many years before by Shalom Aleichem, the Tuvia Cholev. Tevia, it's the milkman. Tevia, the milkman.
Yeah, I believe that
And
it's the same person,
many
no?
years before
Yes, it is.
Zorba, but it's the same person.
Looks like.
Right, right. It's even before.
So when did you decide to become writers? I mean, I want the date. I want the date,
Wow.
yes.
Well, I must say that I wrote, when I was 20, I wrote a novel. 200 pages about myself. And I threw it to the garbage
It's not so long.
immediately. And then I started to write short stories instead of this long and boring novel.
So it wasn't published.
It wasn't published
You
yet.
didn't send it to the
I
publishing
didn't send
house.
anything. I wrote one story. It was published in newspapers and literary places, whatever. But I wrote a story according the only thing my mother remembered from the Holocaust, and it was a conversation between a mother and daughter during a very dark night. There was no light. It was an electric storm or something. And the mother talks to her daughter and tells her, kind of explains her, but not explains, tells her story. And the daughter understands, in a way, why her mother is like as she is. And I sent it to a competition in Haaretz newspaper. It was short story competition, and I won. One
How
of
many
the-
words?
Yeah.
How many words?
Yeah, sorry, I don't
How
know.
many words?
Oh, God knows. 3 pages. I don't remember the words.
1,000.
1,000.
maybe a short story.
What about yours?
What about
The
me?
date.
Oh,
the date.
yeah, actually,
No, but I
gave
didn't
birth-
finish. Just
Oh.
one more sentence. I sent it, and when I got it back and I won the prize, all the publishers called me and wanted to publish my book. So I published it in one
So you
of
didn't
the
get
publishers.
twice
this is how it
rejection as
started.
me. You didn't
No,
get,
I was
like-
lucky. I was lucky. It was different times. It was different
Yeah,
times.
I've got-
Not many women writers.
Okay.
When
Which
I gave birth to my 4th child, I was
Oh, you
38.
got 4 children.
Oh, yes. Yes, I do.
Lucky you.
Lucky them. And then I really have this feeling that I have a hole in my stomach. It was kind of a hole that I felt it's eating me from inside. And then two friends of mine, a soulmates, came over to my house just to say Mazal Tov and to congratulate me. And in the middle, I remember the moment. You asked me for the moment, and I remember the moment because there was a huge noise in the room, and babies and husbands and all the other kids are, they were fighting and all that. And then Vered, my friend, came over from behind and told me, Iris, I don't care about all this, but don't forget you wanted to be an author. It was a moment that she said me like, it came like, my first book is called Maktub. Maktub is something that is written up from above.
Okay.
And I believe this is the first of Maktub, the first word that she came to me like an angel. And the same night I remember, I was 38, and I was occupational therapist. I did the right things, right? I did the right things.
So you were working as a therapist?
Yeah, until I was working as a therapist. And I remember putting my baby, in the arisa, cradle, and then in the other side there was it was January, it was freezing, so it was a heater, and I was starting. I said to myself, Iris, you're going to be an author. And I remember the first sentence I wrote down there. It was about the sun, and then it didn't come out the first sentence of Maktub, but I remember the moment that I said, okay, and I didn't tell it for 2 years that I'm writing. No one, I told no one that I'm writing a book, just to myself.
2 years to write the first novel?
Yeah, 4.
4?
But after the first year, I didn't tell, even not to my husband. He said, what are you doing all that night? I said, I know I'm reading all that. But I was writing the book, and I didn't tell anyone but myself that I want to be an author, and I'm going to be an author.
It's interesting you ask about the moment I decided to be a writer. I think I hadn't decided yet. I had 8 novels, and still, like every novel I publish, I think, yeah, this is the last one. I said already everything I had to say. There's a lot of other interesting things the man can do in life. And then, like,
how old are you?
I'm 47. Treofi came to me in the time of my life. I definitely decided not to write. I had this dream of creating a creative writing school, and for a long time I thought about it, and I was just after publishing this gigantic novel, I thought, no, I can't write anymore, that's it, I'm finished. and then, like, the moment of decision of being a writer is when a novel comes to you. Right. Like when the story came, this first floor story of Arnon, it came to me so strong I couldn't resist it. And then after this book, the Treofi was published, I thought, that's it. 3 confessions, I've done my service, that's it. I have nothing to say. That's the top.
Amazing.
That's the top. And then it took me 2 years, and again something very strong came to me. And I couldn't resist it, and so it happens. I decide to be a writer again and again and again. Maybe, I don't know, maybe this book I'm going to publish in September is my last one.
How long does it take you to complete a novel?
Depends on the novel. Usually writers want to, I think, to brag. That like it took me 7 years to work on the novel, and sometimes it does. With Neuland, which is another book of mine, it took me actually from date of birth till date of publication 6 or 7 years. But with other novels, it works differently. This Treofi was written in 5 explosive months, the first draft. Then redrafting for a
5
year.
months?
Wow.
First draft, 5
So
months. I couldn't stop. It was like a confession. And then I had to redraft again and again and again for a year. But sometimes it takes a while. Sometimes it's very passionate. You can't
Apart
learn.
from writing, do you have another job?
Yeah, sure.
Yes, of
What?
course.
Sure.
Of course.
What?
I teach creative writing in Beersheba University and in Seminar Kibbutzim College. And I write during the night because I don't have enough time during the day, so I hardly sleep. And I must say that I agree with you.
So I'm still a therapist, and I'm teaching students as Esti and as Eshkol. We have to.
And you?
I'm a driver. I take my daughters from place to place, from activity to activity. 3 daughters, and besides, we started 4 years ago,
Yeah,
this
I should-
initiation of a creative writing school, which is a non-profit
businessman.
school all around the country.
Are there many creative
Yes,
writing
actually, you
schools?
know what someone told me today in an interview? A journalist interviewed me, and she told me there's no creative writing workshop in Greece.
No, not
none
at all.
whatsoever.
There are.
Israel is filled with
There-
them.
So you
there's
should,
no-
you should do that.
Is that
I
true?
don't like it at all. I've tried it
No?
3 times.
Oh,
I'm a
really?
terrible teacher, and I have the suspicion
I
that
can't,
the
I
people
don't
that
believe
come.
you. I don't believe you.
No, I'm a terrible. I get bored when I
That's
have to
really?
teach.
that can
I
be a
can talk
problem.
about
No, it's
everything
not
but writing, and I have the suspicion that the people, most of the students of creative writing school, but it's my idea, it's wrong, come there in order to write their story, their life, or their love life, or their sexual life, and they believe that this story is something very special, and they want just to get read by the other students, and it's like I mean, everybody wants to, from all the others, to enjoy not his or her story, but his or herself. I
But
mean, it's a bit
Don't get us
but
started.
They do,
you
but
know?
they do talk. They do give each other. They do read each other. You're right, but isn't writers the same?
That's why I'm a terrible teacher, because this is the first meeting. Then, if you're a good teacher, and I'm sure that you are, you transform your student to something else. But I cannot do it.
I actually don't teach in Beersheba, yes, in Ben Gurion University, but in Seminar Kibbutzim College, I teach filmmaker students, not exactly literature, and design students, because they need to write very short and very precise things. So it interests me because it opened to me a new world of design, of something crafty that I don't do. I'm very bad with my hands. And it teaches me, and you meet worlds, you meet people. You meet people that come from all kinds of places, young and old, and it's,
Yeah,
for
understand.
me, it's very...
I should say
very
they have
enriching.
good hands. Really, I'm a pottery. How do you say that? Pottery.
Pottery. Yeah, pottery.
Yes.
Pottery.
Pottery.
So I
Pottery
do
artist.
have. It's like writing a book. You know, you shape the.
Do the Israelis, are the Israelis readers? Do they read much literature?
By the way, one of the
Israeli-
things you can
Israel,
do in a
no.
creative writing
much.
workshop.
No,
for
no,
instance,
no.
But for your question regarding reading, if you start a creative writing workshop and you also you're a teacher and you want to educate your students, not only to encourage them to publish their bestseller, but also to educate them. If you see yourself as an educator, you are tempting them to read. So
Okay.
this is one of the things that happen.
I can ask
They
this.
learn to read
I
more
ask
than write.
about the Israelis in general.
In general, yes, it's a reading nation. I don't know. When I look at my daughters, they mainly read Instagram stories. So I don't know where it's going. But still, there is a readership in Israel. Still, people come to meeting with writers. People want to write. There is a discussion. It's a reading community. It's about
A
to
lot of
change.
book clubs.
A lot of book clubs. Something is changing in the world, not only in Israel. Technology is changing us. Facebook is changing us. The way of writing, for instance, talking about creative writing, I don't know if you sensed it, but it's a phenomenon of the last 2 or 3 years. People want to write in first person, and they want to write about the truth, like what really happened. It's really important for them to say, this, what I'm about to read, really happened. And we are tempting them to fiction. We have to at least like to draw them into fiction.
It's very
Interesting, because my student said the opposite. They said, we can't write it. It's true. What about my mother? What about my grandmother? What about my
They want
father?
to write
How
truth?
they want to
They
write
want
it,
to
but
write
they
it.
can't. They terrified of writing
okay,
the truth
okay.
because of the.
Are you
I
terrified, or do you feel shy of writing something very personal? I mean, do you λογοκρισία, πώς λέγεται?
Afraid, yeah, intimidated.
Do you censor yourselves?
Do we
Well,
censor it?
Censor?
No,
What-
censor, like censura.
Censor.
Well, I'm facing this question right now because I'm going to publish a very personal book. And yes, I'm troubled with the question, will it bother or hurt people around me? And while we are speaking, my parents in Haifa are reading the manuscript. And I'm waiting to get the WhatsApp, and it's not coming. So, what I try to do is when I write, I try to be completely non-considerate. I don't give a damn. I have the story. I'm committed to
Yeah,
the
me
story.
too.
I don't care about anyone but the characters. But when I'm about to publish, then
It's
the
scary.
ethical questions come into consideration. And of course, it matters how important is the person to me. Of course, my parents are very important to me, and I don't want them to be hurt or embarrassed in any way. But when they are reading a novel of mine,
Change the names.
Yeah.
yeah, of course, I have
think-
changed the names.
Probably.
But it doesn't
I
help
have this
changing
funny
the names.
story about this sex scenes because my books are full of them, okay, of sex scenes.
But I
And
wanted to say something about the
No.
the question.
Let her.
we came over to talk about sex. Esti, you can't do
no.
that.
I want
So
to say
anyway, and my first book is about a love triangle that the Irit is the main character, and she betrayed her husband Arik with the Ahsan, the gardener, the Arabic gardener. This is the story, okay, of Maktub.
There's
My
another
first
guy, D.H. Lawrence.
it's kind of
something.
everybody
Yes.
said something about it, and
Yeah.
so
I'm not even genuine.
one day it was 6 o'clock in the morning. I got a phone call 6 o'clock in the morning. I was kind of sleeping. I came up to to make sandwiches to my kids and all that, and then someone on the line asked me, Iris? And I said, yes. She said, Iris Cohen Elia? And I said, yes. And she said, did you write Maktub? And I said, yes. What do you want? It's 6 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
Saying, and I have to ask you, I just finished reading your book, and I have to ask you something. I said, okay, can you do it later? It's like 6 o'clock in the morning.
Do
she
you
said-
write your
and she said-
phone number?
Yeah, actually, they know it everything from the
They
Facebook.
can
Israel.
find it.
It's
They
Israel.
can find
It's Israel, right. So I said, what? He said, no, it's a really, really short question. Please let me, can you call just in an hour? Kids all over my head and my bed and all that. He said, no, it's just a question. I said, okay, what's the question? She said, why did you cheat your husband? I mean, she totally thought that I'm the main character of this
course.
book, okay? Of course.
course.
So we get it all the time. Everybody, all
the
the
time.
readers think that we are the main characters,
We
okay?
talked about it.
So though we can try to, to censor ourselves and say you change names
No,
and all
that
that.
won't help anyway.
Yeah, at the end of the thing, it's our.
Madame
it's our
Bovary is me.
buddies
The
here.
same. I think that in this novel, I must say that this novel is autobiographic in a way. It's about a post-traumatic family, about people that live on the edge. And luckily, my father read everything I wrote, and when I wrote it, you sometimes don't feel you write about real people. You just into the book, and the book it was necessary for me to read it. I waited 4 books to write it, actually. And it was inside me all the time, and I had to write it. And when it came out, I don't care about anything. For me, writing is living, and it's on the edge. But I didn't want anybody of my family to read it. Luckily, my mother can't read, she's sick, and my father became dementive. So my brother, I convinced him not to read the book. I don't know until today if he read, but can I read a short paragraph? Or
Yes,
do we have
I thought of reading it myself
Do you want to read it?
with a Greek accent.
Okay. So wait. Okay. I wanted to say before you read it.
Okay.
Just a minute. It's a very, very short paragraph from this book that deals with that. I'm tired. Only this short,
Yes. Okay.
this short thing.
I'm
And-
tired. Oh,
Yeah, but
Yes.
only this.
I'm tired. Tired from years of fighting, tired of carrying the dead members of my family inside me, like a reverse pregnancy. Sometimes it seems that if I let them go, they'll be forgotten, and I don't want that. I write so as to give birth to them and then to bury them, so as not to be so tired, so as to be able to live.
Yeah, that's it, because this is why I wrote this
So
book.
you need to write in order to live, survive.
To survive, because she lives in her family house, and without her parents, they died. She doesn't work. She doesn't have any love. She doesn't have any children. I have 2 sons. It's not me. And immediately we have to say we are innocent. We're not guilty. And Shimon Peres' daughter, I know her from culture. We meet and sometimes, but we're not friends. And she asked one of my friends when she read the book, does Esti have children? Does she live in her home, her parents' house? That she lives alone? And we identify with the main character. We identify, she's me, definitely, of course. But I don't care. My uncle didn't speak with me for 6 months, for example, because the grandfather was too gloomy, and he was thinking all the time about the past, and he was not living, and he said he wasn't like that. But in the character, who was. So you take the chance. Otherwise, it's not worthwhile doing it.
Iris,
it's not honest.
Are you afraid of the reviews, of the criticism?
Actually,
Do you
I
read
was
them?
very spoiled. Yes, of course. Who can, and all the talkbacks and all the, how would you say, talkbacks, at the bottom of the... in Maktub and Dushinka, my second book was really, accepted very, very good. And then I came out a really problematic book, which deals with the abduction of the Yemen kids in Israel. It's a huge historical thing in Israel that back in the 50s there were thousands of kids that were kidnapped from their parents. And I published the book, and it was kind of the first book that's dealing with this thing. And it's about, I don't know if everybody here is familiar with the terms Mizrahic and Ashkenazic thing, Mizrahic and Ashkenazic Jews. And I'm considered a Mizrahic Jew. You can see it by my color. And there was a lot of, I never expected such a wave of Ashkenazic critics that blame me, and they hated the book, and they wrote these awful things about the book. I never expected such a boom. It was overwhelming. But then I said, I always said that after Galbi, it's my heart in Yemen accent language. After Galbi came out, and I got this really, flicks all the time, and I said, okay, I got mine. Now I can publish everything. Nothing can be worse than what Galbi got.
Sometimes, rarely, reviews can be interesting. Usually they're not really meaningful in any way, but a very interesting thing happened with Tre Orfi, with this book. When it was published in Israel, the writing process was so explosive, I didn't even stop to think, what exactly am I doing? I just had to write the book and had to write the 3 confessions, and I was not really completely aware of the meaning of the book. So the book was published, and at the first meeting I had with audiences in Israel, I usually would kind of read some pieces and then ask for questions and not really knowing what to do. And then there was an article, a review in Haaretz, in a critic named Omri Herzog.
He's great.
Usually he's very hard on me. And then he analyzed the book, and the headline was The Dark Sides of Parenthood. And I thought, that's what my book is about. The dark sides of parenthood. And I actually had to be totally unaware of it to write it, because if I had thought that it's about the dark sides of parenthood, maybe I would be too scared to write it. So now when I look at the book, or when I talk about it, or when people ask, it's totally clear. That is the thing that connects the three floors. That in every floor there's a parent who does a mistake, who is ashamed of something, who is not, who is struggling with his parenthood or with the connection between parenthood and couple, but I did not see it. So sometimes, rarely, reviews can be a revelation.
I think I agree with you that sometimes you discover something because we don't really know what we're writing about. This is only one side, the writing. The other side is the reading, and literature becomes when it connects, I think, when somebody reads you.
Of course.
I
mean, the book...
this is the miracle. Yeah.
The book, when you publish it, is a half.
Right.
It becomes the whole when somebody reads
Right.
it.
Definitely. And I just want to say that critics, I'm afraid of them, and although I was spoiled and from the first book, and on my third book, which also about parenthood, about motherhood, I remember it was great critics. The first one, I was crying because she understood it, because we want to be understood. And there was one that was like, she said good things and bad things. And they called me from the publishers and said, "Are you okay?" I said, "No, I'm on the roof. I want to die. It's terrible." And everything can be great, but I feel like I'm exposed, and I needed to go away to rest a little, because everything is just going through you, and you are standing in the middle of the city, totally naked, and everybody can or throw tomatoes at you, or can give you flowers.
You know that in the Greek theater,
I know, exactly.
100 years ago, they were not throwing tomatoes; they were throwing pillows.
Is it? Really?
Yes.
But in the Shakespeare theater, they were throwing tomatoes later.
Tomatoes. Yes,
vegetables.
but the tomatoes in England, in the UK, are very expensive.
Maybe then it wasn't. But anyway, it's very
expensive because of the climate. So it was always.
They export it. But you're how do you say chasuf? You
Exposed.
are exposed. I say you are very exposed. You're naked. So this makes me. I hate to publish books. I like to write them when it's published, and it can be great. And
Why don't you publish them with another name, a false name?
Oh,
that's a great idea.
Great idea, but problematic.
I will do it.
I will explain you why it's impossible in Israel. Okay.
Everybody knows
Once after my first, after Homesick, my first novel to succeed in Israel, I decided that my next novel will be with a pseudonym, with a fake name, more convenient, less exposed. And I told about this plan to two people. I'm going to publish a book with a fake name. Then a week later, I go in Rothschild Boulevard, and a guy stops with a bicycle, like, "Hey, Eshkol, I heard you're going to publish a book with a fake name." So this is Israeli society. Everybody knows everybody. You cannot keep
But
secrets.
actually, there were few Pasadons in Israel late years. Paul something.
Yeah, there was somebody
Maybe
that wrote.
It's you. No, it's
Maybe.
I remember.
actually. Oh my gosh, this is you, right?
No, but it's a good idea.
Aris,
Yes.
are there in Israel critics power enough? I mean, as if
Yes, definitely.
somebody
No,
writes for
not
you a review in the paper, and the next day thousands of readers go to the bookstores and buy your
Not
book.
thousand, but
No.
hundred. Yes.
No,
yes.
but no,
Like I know from my first book, Maktub, what was in wine. It was a really פורץ דרך. How do you say? Breakthrough, like it was a huge compliment, and it became a bestseller like in a week. I really think the critics of Maktub
It influences.
It's
But there are no big critics now in Israel as they were before.
Were there in the past?
There was, sorry?
But still,
Were
you
there
can
in the
say-
past?
Yes,
Maybe I would
yes,
say
there
the
were in the
opposite
past.
way, you know
wait,
what?
just a minute. When I published 20 years ago my first book, it was mostly in the newspaper. Now it's in the internet, the Facebook. Everybody can be a critic. So yes, there were in the past because the newspaper, it was
and the
powerful.
internet. But I
The
would
internet
say
is
the opposite
less.
thing that maybe
It's different.
it won't
It's different.
bring thousands of buyers to the books, but the opposite can be like a famous, very good a writer that published a very terrible one, and he got a lot of bad critics. People won't buy his book, right? If he got like
It
few
happens.
bad.
Actually, it's a very
sometimes
small
it's on-
society. I think word of mouth works the best. If everybody knows everybody, and everybody is a sister of
That's
everybody,
much.
and so it's if a book, I think, because one of the reasons Maktub was so successful is because I heard my students talking about this book with each other, and they liked it, so they passed it on. I don't.
Is
It's
there
not
in
about
Israel-
critics.
In Greece, we have the recent years this phenomenon, the pink literature.
What is pink?
The pink
Gay?
literature. I mean, something like there was a famous lady, English lady that started internationally this thing, like a soap opera, but in the
romantic,
form of a book.
Popular literature.
When
Yeah,
somebody,
there is a lot of-
there is a guy that is very good looking and
Okay.
a blonde girl
50
and
50 Shades.
Of course.
yes, like the 50 Shades. Is this phenomenon? And I mean, if
Yes.
if
Yes,
a lady writer in
Yes, there are
Greece
some.
publishes her book, which is totally pink, it would sell. It could sell 500,000.
Wow.
Yes.
Really? In Israel too, actually. There are
Israel
some
too.
popular women writers, and they sell much more.
500?
There is the difference between, like, it's called fine literature in Israel, it's fab, and popular literature. And popular literature sells more, much, much more. I think that for example, I usually read everything, but when I start reading it, I know some of these writers, and they're nice people, and they are even very clever ones. But I start reading it, I'm not used to it anymore because they write, it's a little banal, cliché, and what's interesting in it for people is the plot, and it gives them really pink
Plot,
glasses, and they see the world as
It's
they
easy.
want it.
It's easy for many readers to get identified
Right.
with the characters of a pink novel.
Right. Sometimes it can be historical with
Yes,
all kind.
not historical, sentimental.
It's sentimental and historical, but they take history and make it sentimental. For
Okay,
example.
that's good. I believe that it's time to go. I'll ask just 2 more questions, and then you will have the privilege to ask me 1 question.
Only one.
Only one. So the first question to you, and I will start for the gentleman, is which was the best and which was the worst thing that you have heard about your books? The best and the worst.
The best experience.
Experience or the thing that somebody told you, have told you about,
Okay, the best and the worst.
and the worst.
Okay, so let's start with the worst. My first book, Homesick, Arba'abati V'Ga'agua, was published in Israel. And in the book, there is a very central scene of a football game. I don't know how it goes in Greece. Who is the enemy of who in Greek football? But in Israel, we have Beitar Jerusalem and Hapoel Tel Aviv, which are the enemies. And I'm describing this football game in which one of my characters goes with a child. The child loses his brother at the beginning of the book, and he takes him as a birthday present to a match between Beitar Jerusalem and Hapoel Tel Aviv. How would you like? What's the analogy in Greece? Rivals, like big rivals. Olympiacos, Panathinaikos. Okay, so I'm this, and it's a central game, and it's happening in 1995, and then the book is published, and I get a telephone to my home. It's Bezek telephone. It's not cellular, like line telephone, and there's someone on the phone. And he's telling me, "Are you Eshkol?" I say, "Yeah." I read your book and I'm very disappointed, deeply disappointed. So why? He said, because you describe a game between Beitar Jerusalem and Hapoel Tel Aviv And you write that the
It's
result is 1-1. No, it was 2-1 to Beitar Jerusalem. I lost faith in you completely. I will not buy your books anymore. And seriously, this is a true story. And it teaches you something about being serious and doing your research like you should. So now the best reaction, okay? This happened to me with Treorofi, and it was 2 years ago. It was published in Italy, and I had a book club in Milano discussing the book. And I remember the setting. It was a private home. It was about 40 or 50 people. And we talked about the book. They asked questions. I answered. And then one lady raised her hand, and she said, I want to thank you. Because after I read your book, I could forgive myself. Now, she didn't tell why. She didn't tell the story behind the story. Nothing, just that and silence. And I thought, that's what I'm writing for, exactly for this moment, so someone can feel forgiven, can feel understood, can feel not being judged through the characters. So for me, it was a magical moment. I remind myself, whenever I'm stuck, whenever I'm struggling with a novel, or I remind myself of this moment. Yeah.
Me, as I said before, Galbi got really, really bad critics. The peak was one critic that he really smashed the book. He smashed, and then at the end he said, "Please don't buy this book." He said, "Yes," and then. About Galbi, Yoni Livne. And then like a week later, it became a big bestseller. And I was so happy, it was my revenge of him, because no one probably read this critic. The other thing is about my poem book. I've got a poem book called Wonder. It's a collection of poems, and a long one. And one of them is telling the story of my first labor. Me and my daughter both were about to die. I mean, we are very, very close to dying. It was a horrifying labor, and it took me almost 20 years to write this. I mean, she's 22 now, and Naomi, my Naomi, and took me really a lot of time. I remember myself each day, and each birthday, adding one more paragraph to this poem, and it came out last year, and one of the best critics, a very important one, wrote it is about a masterpiece. So that was my present, both to Naomi and both. Yeah,
that's great. I think there are many moments that are worst and best. One of them is when I wasn't publishing a book yet, only a story that talks about a young girl that comes from Haifa to her uncle and her aunt that live in Tel Aviv. She is 12, and her mother is very sick mentally, and she's going to these two people that doesn't have children in Tel Aviv, and the uncle loves her too much. Very gently, it's very gently written. It happens, the name of the story was Geula Street 18A, and it was many years ago. Somebody called me, and he said, "Did you write a story about something that happened in Rehov Geula 18A?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I read it in the newspaper. You wrote about me." This is the worst moment. How did you know? Where do I live? How do I live? How did you know about my uncle and my aunt? How did you know how my house looks? I was terrified. I wasn't publishing anything before.
Probably he was a lunatic.
It was probably, but he said, this is me, and this is what I felt, and this is what happened to me. I was terrified. So when the book was published, I changed the name, Geula Street 70A, because in this street there was no 70. The great moment, one of the great, there are many. I think some of them is when this book was published and David Grossman called me and talked about an hour about the book. I couldn't stop, so it was great because he understood it. He understood the book and he felt it, and I appreciate that. I appreciate him, so it made me happy. But I think every reader that tells me, like you said, that tells you that it changed him. Many people from Hungary and non-Hungary called me and wrote me after this book, after other books, and told me it changed something. They keep thinking.
That's a bet of an artist, to change the reader or the viewer or the listener. But I want you now, with 2 sentences, just 2, to give us your sense of Greece. You are briefly here. Have you been here in the past?
Yeah.
In
yeah.
Athens?
Yeah.
Or in
Last
Greece?
year.
I've been in the islands.
Okay. Tell us
Corfu.
2 sentences that come from this visit.
Well,
It doesn't matter. Since they are writers,
I can tell you about Hydra. I can tell you about the sounds in a Hydra night. You hear, because there are no cars, and suddenly you understand how much noise do cars make. So you sit on a balcony and you hear birds and a donkey and dogs and owls, and you hear the clouds moving and you hear people fighting, because the echo in this Hydra small valley is amazing. You sit on this tiny balcony and you hear all the world, and this was Greece for me this time.
For me, I just thought about that Greek is very, very, very similar to Israel. I mean, we are such a twin countries. Everything here, you know, I usually write a diary for every place I'm going, and I tell stories and I take pictures of the places, but I couldn't do anything. I mean, everything is just the same. I mean, it's the same as it is in Israel. I mean, that was my. Don't take it hard.
No.
but it's really
So
Mediterranean
Greece,
cities.
You face Greece as a mirror of Israel.
Exactly. The people, the weather, the city, the stores, everything is like the same.
But all the world becomes a little bit the same, you know. I think because
Yes,
all the
that's
world
right.
becomes the same, the
Yes,
buildings
that's right.
become the same. Everybody, my husband says something like,
This is
wherever you
called
go,
globalization.
wherever you go, you see a nice building, and you look through the window and you see a person sits in front of a computer, and that's it. But in Greece, in the islands, I've been in Corfu, I've been in Rhodos, in Crete, in Faros, and other islands, and now in Athens. I think Athens is different. I think it doesn't matter how the buildings look like, it's nice and everything, it's vivid, and it doesn't matter anything. What matters to me are the people, and I think the people in Athens are very friendly, in Greece, and very frank, and I enjoy meeting the people in the street and here, and I think everything is about communication, and I like to communicate with people here.
So thank you very much.
No. What about our
Well,
question?
good question.
Okay. I hope that you
I
have
have a
forgotten
question.
this.
I want to
Okay.
start. I want to know what I didn't read them, unfortunately, but what you've got 7
Books.
books?
14.
14.
Yes.
Oh my gosh! Wow, respect.
Wow.
What are the what are the book that is most you feel very, very attached to, and what is it about, and why?
Why? Obviously, the book that you are most attached to is the last one. I mean, my last novel. I hope it's not the last one. I mean,
You latest.
least but not last.
Right.
Yes, which was published 15 days ago.
Oh,
And,
really?
yeah,
Congratulations!
the title is Phoenix,
Really?
And I believe that I put all myself, all my hopes, all my thoughts, all my feelings, all my story in this book. And it's not an autobiography. It has nothing to do with me. I mean, the story. It starts from the 1860.
What's the name?
Phoenix.
Phoenix.
And goes 1927. It's the story of a young Greek poet and his tycoon American girlfriend or wife. It has nothing to do with me, but nevertheless, I turned myself into a book. On the other hand, my first book, my first novel, which was, I wrote it when I was 23, and it was published when I was 26, back in 1993, and it made me a writer, a professional writer, and it gave me the house that I live in. I mean, yes, I bought a house. And I say that every brick is a copy of my first book. So it made me very proud.
Wow.
Great.
Okay.
Great. First, congratulations. I hope it will be. You
It
said
needs
that
luck.
the two of your books were translated into Hebrew, so we're looking. I would like to know which ones and to read them and find them. I think. What makes you write? Like, do you have every book you have a different ideas, different. Every book is different from the other, or do you think you have?
I believe that I
same-
try. You know, there are two kinds of narrators, and I say narrators, not writers, because I believe that the filmmakers, even the songmakers, the songwriters, are narrators as well. There are two kinds. The first kind is the narrator that narrates and re-narrates the same story. As an example, I would take, let's say, Federico Fellini. Federico Fellini is a great director of the cinema, but I believe that he tells us the same story
He does.
in different aspects. The other kind is the one that his books or his movies don't look alike. And the perfect example is Stanley Kubrick. There's no one movie by Stanley Kubrick that looks like the other one. I want to look like Kubrick, not.
Oh, interesting. I give the
Not
same
like Fellini.
example with actors. You have, for example, Laurence Olivier that changes, and you had Marlon Brando that all the time was the same, but he still was great and had.
Marlon Brando
charisma.
was the same.
Yeah, it was.
Was he the same in The Last
Oh,
Tango in
except
Paris?
in the. I think in
And
a
in
way.
The
or maybe
Godfather?
No, he was a little right. In The Godfather, he was.
I believe that
outstanding.
the best example of this kind of actor is Jack Nicholson.
Jack Nicholson, exactly.
is the same always.
Right, but
But
he's still a good actor.
genial.
So you are from the second. You want
I
to change.
I need to be.
You need to.
I need to be
But
somebody.
Ishkol got the best.
I wanted to ask you, what are you smoking? And is it good? Is it good for writing? And are you friendly to offer us also?
I used to smoke. You know, my father died when he was 48 because he was smoking 4 packs daily from when he was 13. In the day of his funeral, I went to his funeral. An uncle of me came, embraced me, and told me, "Okay, you can become an anarchist or a terrorist. You can have drugs. You can become gay. You can become Freemason. You can become whatever." But you don't have the right to smoke. So when I was 15, the first thing that I did was start smoking. And I was smoking cigarettes, 2 packs a day for nearly 30 years. And I had I was terrified. I was sure that I would die. I even counted the days, how many days my father lived, and I said he had lived for some 1,000 days. I don't know how many days. I don't remember how many days from day one till you are 48 and 6 months. But I put it, and I said that I would die. I would live as long as my father lived. So I would die in 5th January of 2015.
But still
And
smoked.
it was my love, my passion, my other self, the cigarette.
Yeah.
Wow.
But the 5th of January passed, and I was still alive and kicking. But then I went to, by accident, because I was waiting for my daughter to finish the kindergarten, so I had 2 hours free, and downtown Athens, I went to a store and I bought this thing, which is electronic cigarette, it's called, and I put it in my mouth, and it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then it was midnight, and I hadn't lit a cigarette. So I jumped very normally, without any pressure, from cigarette to electronic cigarette, and the doctors that I asked tell me that it's much more healthy, or much less,
Devastating.
yes, harmful. So, and it has another good thing. You don't need these ashtrays and the ash
Doesn't
and
smell.
it doesn't smell. And you can smoke it everywhere, because do this thing even in the airplane
Wow.
when the stewardess turns her back. Nobody sees you, and nobody.
Does
Where's
it affect
Ilan?
your body? Does it has any affection?
No, I feel whenever I wake up. I mean, I wake up every morning till now, and I feel like a bull. The funny thing is that since I'm 51 now, whenever I get to sleep, I get in my bed, I think that let's think that next morning I don't wake up. I
Well,
have
you
this
can
this thought.
You don't need cigarettes to think that. We can think it anyway.
They say that when you wake up, if you wake up when you are more than 50 years old, and there's no pain in you, your feet or your hand or your head. If you don't feel pain anywhere, you are just dead.
You're right. Can you read
Yes.
this?
And now
You want to read?
we close.
This is just a minute. This is from my 3rd book. Something Good Will Happen Tomorrow. That's the
Yes.
name, and it's an ironic name. But this is a part of a child of a 13 years old child diary, and he loves
Jim
the
Morrison.
Doors. The Doors. It was a rock band.
So I will complete this presentation. I believe that it was even juicier than I have thought. Yes. And then you can ask whatever, and then we can dance.
I would love that.
We can
I'm
dance,
a dancer.
Zorba dance.
I would like
So I start. I sometimes imagine that I'm meeting Jim Morrison. He's sitting there, like, cool, a cigarette in his hand, and behind him a hotel swimming pool. The rest of the band are swimming and spraying water, but he's fully dressed, thinking his thoughts. He moves his head a little, almost undetectably. For a few minutes, we sit side by side without speaking, and then I tell him that there is something I've got to ask him. What, he says, and I ask, Jim, tell me, what's it like being you? Aren't you the happiest guy in the world? Because you are Jim Morrison. Jim Morrison starts to reply. He says it's a pity he didn't use that knowledge when he was young and alive. Sometimes he peeps and sees masses of people coming to his grave in Paris and says to himself, look at all that love, and I just suffered. I certainly wouldn't have written all those sad songs if I'd known I was so happy.
Yeah.
Because when you're happy, you don't know it.
Yeah, you don't know it, and then you write. If we are happy.
Thank you very much. Do you have anything to ask?
Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have you
You're
got
a
anything to
great
ask?
host.
No, thanks. Okay.
Thank you.
See you in our
no.
next show.
There's somebody that is.
There's a question.
אם אתה רוצה, כן, אם יש לך...
Sorry.
באהבה.
הוא לא סיימו, ישנו שאלות. איריס, יש שאלות.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
What was it?
High in quality, and I don't know which one is the best. That's all. That's all I want to say. But I think you're all the best.
I didn't
Thank
hear
you.
the end.
כולנו היינו ברמה מאוד גבוהה, ולא יודעים מי מאיתנו.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you
so
Pleasure.
very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Nice
Thank
meeting
you. So
you.
much.
Thank you.
So, thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's not us, it's the host. You had very good questions.
Great host.
You are
Wow,
the best.
amazing questions.
Definitely. Yeah.